This tape is a rap, impromptu, on what the U.S. Army believes it should be allowed to get away with. I'll start by disclosing the attorney's blurb, which was given to me by Charles Kirshner and Son, who were favorites of the Pitt administration who designed the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and they were Israelis. They didn't have double allegiance. They just had dual citizenship. It reads, "There's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes." You can see that translates, any professor can translate that from English into English. You don't need a sign language interpreter to translate it back and forth between sign language and trickery. There's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes. Correct me if I am wrong, but this translates into there's no such thing as objective reality, only what the U.S. media tells you is true from its operation in the Israeli homeland. You don't need the verification. Although plenty of verification there certainly is. To see that this means that Gail Burston's Texas School Book was a movie script in which reality was being used, media was being used to trick everyone. Abraham Lincoln once said, "You can fool some of the people all the time, and you can fool all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all the time." And Donald J. Toon snicked, "Want to make a bet?" Donald and Richard took this dare and decided that they were going to fool all of the people all the time by faking John Lennon's murder and using it as a deflection to promote the people they claimed killed him. And it worked. There was no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury was tricked into imagining. And that you were somehow equal to the great monsters of television was a double fantasy. When I say there is evidence for this, it's crystal clear. The House of Windsor, Duke Edward, came in the 1920s to announce that the Church of England was going to control Hollywood. He was a friend of Adolf Hitler. He married an American woman named Simpson and caused a political disaster in his homeland. There's a lot about him and his friendship with Hitler. He went to Argentina, probably to help the Nazis get away. And Cecil B. DeMille was put in charge of Radio Free Europe by Allen Dulles to signify a plan from 1919 with Spensky's crowd at the New Age newsletter, of a super production of a mythical apocalypse, which is what's going on now. This conjuring act of warlords traces to Fayum, D'Annunzio, D.W. Griffith, Mussolini, and involved the escape of Adolf Hitler and Lenin Sudini. Although they deafened me, they set up a situation of production rights. What George Bush could arrange on a childhood class officer of his ship, the San Jacinto, in the Navy with the help of Ken Crimson and Peter Gabriel. They took me out of school, they tortured me, they deafened me, and they weren't going to hear about human rights, which was my father's vocational testimony. He wrote a book in the 40s called America's Stake in Human Rights. What they were going to do instead was contract character assassination on a traumatized deaf child. And they would always say, I don't want to hear it, whenever idealism came up. Human rights was not even a consideration for Donald and Richard. They streamlined it into their intelligence banks and got AI to spit out ecocide stories when they were the ones responsible for the ecocide. They mocked me when I brought up ecology at the community college in Pittsburgh back in the 70s as a poor little Aquarian boy. But they had their bases covered anyway. They kidnapped me to a place called King's Estate, which was like King's Heavenly Estate, the ramp to Auschwitz. And the Beatles and the rock industry played the role of the fiddlers of Troubadour. Grapefruit, said the croquet Greguster, which was clearly what Kennedy's head sounded like smashing against the wall, is only to be believed if it spontaneously evaporates. You must be Aaron Bushnell, Sean Straub, Michael Foucault if you want to be believed. Otherwise, taking a hit of marijuana from Ralph Karsh of Governor Shap's entourage is a sentence punishable by death. So you can either die or you can die. And you're like the thief on the cross, choosing whether to die honestly or die dishonestly over a puff of marijuana when you were 10 years old, given to you by a sworn stranger Israeli adult operating from the Tel Aviv homeland in Highland Park or Pittsburgh. George Bush believes he should be allowed to make these arrangements. That's what management means to Bush at Federal Emergency Management Agency. He should be allowed to contract hotties and castrate his peer from the Navy. He should be allowed to use a deaf civilian as an object in a secret illegal cult. Unsurprisingly, he was slapping 5 of the oligarch corridor barbershop with the ruffians of the former Soviet Union. The KGB and the CIA were slapping 5 and laughing hard. He encrypted books by Jesse Jackson about Jesse Jackson with DD and looted the banks of linguistic anthropology, meaning peep show secret tapes, for the libels and slanders of John Schulman and Andrea Swimmer. And Peter Gabriel conjured this as revolution number 9. 2 virgins pussy ball. So any woman who has lost her virginity to the gas chamber under this systematic of emergency management, go behind the smoke screen, and maybe you'll leave a legacy of services rendered. George Bush is criminally insane. He's responsible for providing the jolly green carpet to this monstrous ogre, hurling Balrog firing rocks at the poor civilians in the Middle East. The Middle East is a place that has been controversial and in a largely peaceful struggle amongst themselves for the best way to live to engage in charity and preservation. These are ancient, thousands of years old civilizations. We have no business interfering if we lack cultural competence and our only goal is to loot and to despoil. But don't try telling George Bush that, because he has a special military beam and he will brainwave you all the way to an imaginary hell designed by Yoko Ono and Clint Eastwood. And it won't be imaginary for very long. You'll die screaming. This is what the military believes it should be allowed to get away with. When they surrounded me in stolen cars at an elementary school, kidnapped, tortured, and molested me with the help of Wadenmakers in neurobehavioral research. Wadenmaker took me to films that had vomit bags. But shortly afterwards, a man named Casper put a paint thinner rag in a paper bag and forced me to put it over my face and inhale it. And Yoko Ono came cackling. We don't believe you. You must go the way of Aaron Bushnell like a grapefruit, and then maybe we'll see. He took me to the incredible two-headed transplant, which has a criminal, clearly the mind of Israel, transplanted onto a man with Down syndrome, clearly the moron, Pete Hesketh. And he says, now I've got to teach this moron how to walk. Wadenmaker implanted a neuroplasm and imagined he would teach Jimmy Crary how to walk. And he had the blessings of George Bush. You taught me how to walk as a little boy, didn't you, Georgie?